Alright, so there's a lot I want to say on this video. I mean, what an amazing episode. We could all complain about past episodes, we could all complain about future episodes probably, but I don't think we can complain about this one. Even the question of where is Bellamy, I mean, who cares on this episode, because this episode was not really about the regular cast of the 100, this was about something completely different. This is your backdoor pilot to the prequel to the series, a very good one at that. And this as well is an episode that does a great job of connecting all the dots. We could all agree there's some epic writing right there. I mean, how they tied everything together, how they made sense of everything put together in a very good way. But first and foremost though, let me get started by saying welcome back guys to my review of Anaconda, the 8th episode of the 7th and final season, sadly the final season of the 100. Alright, so what about this episode? Now the first thing, and as usual, let's talk about the title of the episode, Anaconda. It's a title that refers to the end of things. You know, Judgment Day, the launch of the missiles by Ali. That was basically a code within the Second Dawn, a code that when heard meant head to the bunker. It is happening right now. But alright though, let's start before all the flashbacks, that very first scene. So I know a lot of people are all about Bellamy and Clarke ending up with one another and all that good stuff. I was never up for the idea, by the way. I've always been against it. I've always voiced that in the comments when people talk to me about it. Always been a fan of their friendship rather than anything beyond that. And you can see why on this episode. I mean, not everything has to be in hearts, you know, big pink and red hearts. Not everything has to be about a relationship. Not everything has to be about, you know, all kinds of attraction within this kind of relationship. Instead, the 100 has managed to pretty much depict a beautiful friendship, one between two members of the opposite sex, both of whom could have been otherwise, you know, in that kind of relationship, but they chose the friendship. That's what's beautiful about this. It is different. Not everything has got to end that way, and I love that. You can see it in the powerful impact that the alleged death of Bellamy had on Clarke on this episode. But okay, heading closer towards all those flashbacks, all those beautiful reveals on this episode, Clarke meets Bill Cadogan for the first time. Not the first time she's seen him though, but the first time she's actually met him, like face to face. Bill Cadogan, on the other hand, claims that they were not a cult. The Second Dawn was not really a cult, and it kinda makes partial sense. It wasn't indeed a cult initially, but it did end up being that kind of thing because of what he did, the God complex bit of him kind of getting to his head. It is true though what he said there. They were indeed a collective of brilliant minds aiming at saving the human race, and that's what ended up creating the Second Dawn. That's what ended up with them in the bunker as the apocalypse hit. Now everyone is asked, what about Clarke? What makes her so special? Clarke had the flame in the back of her neck. Clarke had that inserted into her, and that pretty much makes her very special. She's got the memories of all those, you know, previous commanders, including Becca Prime Hedda, and this episode even gives us more insight on why she was burnt at the stake. Some people were theorizing that, you know, they did that because they hated her, they were working with Ali, they wanted the Earth destroyed. That was never the objective, really. You could have even guessed that before this episode, because Becca came back like a couple of years after the Earth was destroyed by Ali, after, you know, the apocalypse, Judgment Day. But okay though, behind the first door is reveal number 1 on this episode, and that's all about Bill Cadogan's daughter. So Callback, Bill Cadogan's daughter, is the one that started that language, you know, the Grounder language. That's the language she made up as a child, and one that kept going with her as she grew up, ending up becoming the language that we've known over so many seasons. Now the language has changed a little bit. That does happen when you've spent so many years using a language. You know, words get added, words get removed, and this has been like 200 years or so, a little bit over 200 years actually. So it is understandable that he does not really understand every word, but he does understand the majority of what Clarke and Raven are saying there. But the excitement though about knowing more about Grounder history, about the origin of a lot of things on this series does not stop there. The moment that Bill's daughter goes, gear up, Trikru needs us, that was such an epic moment. I mean, it is lovely how it is all connected, how the writing managed to connect it all the pieces of the puzzle. How the two standing sides, no matter where they originated, they both ended up on one of both sides. You know, the people in Sanctum and the people in Bordeaux. One group is metaphorically fathered by Bill Cadogan, while the other group is metaphorically mothered by Callback Cadogan. And looking at the origin story, these two groups are not supposed to see eye to eye. I don't think they're ever going to see eye to eye. So from the first moment on this episode, or the first few moments, we're getting the understanding that the one person that connects it all, second on the Flame, Trikru, it's always been Callback, all of which is once again seriously a brilliant move on the writer's end. Now originally though, Trikru was not this group of people, not the Grounders. Trikru was the protest movement Callback was running with. That's the origin of that name that ended up becoming the identity of a whole lot of generations of Grounders. Callback though, she thinks of her father as a prophet of doom. At the very beginning we hear that. She was part of the Second Dawn and so was her mother, but they ended up leaving. They were totally against this entire movement, this entire cult-like thing. But this is the part that is in the more distant past. The part that is in the closer distant past is the part about the missiles being in the air, bringing us to a common point in time, one that we've watched before on the series. We're just seeing it from a different perspective, the perspective of the Second Dawn instead of Becca's perspective. So into the bunker everyone goes, the doors close, the fire spreads, the radiation spreads, and the world around them does burn. An iconic moment does hit in there, when all these people are screaming outside, when she remembers her best friend that she left behind. Your fight is over. I mean, we've heard that statement so many times over the course of the series, and once you've been there for 7 seasons, these kind of things feel pretty nostalgic. Now before I get into the tone and the series of events that went on to the end of this episode, I gotta say, I did love the many perspectives on Bill Cadogan. So the first perspective was his, as I mentioned earlier. He tells Clarke that they were not a cult. The second perspective was the perspective of the wife. She says to her daughter that he's not a liar, implies that he cares, but then also mentions that he's just a narcissist with sociopathic tendencies. But finally though, there is always the perspective of the daughter, Callback, the perspective that this guy is a prophet of doom who doesn't care about anyone but his own god complex. Now that god complex is also pretty obvious on this episode. I mean, the man wasn't really all that much of that kind of person at the very beginning. He was greedy, he was selfish, he wanted to figure out that stone that mattered a lot to him, but in the end he became that kind of person. Worshipped for 2 years, it could make that out of a man whose moral compass is already off, and his moral compass has always been off. But okay though, 2 years later in the bunker, they are out and Becca Prime Hedda descends to Earth. Long story short, she was the one to figure out some of the codes, or actually all of the codes on that stone, that artifact, and that's why they want Clarke. They want the remnants of that flame. They want to find out that one code they are missing. That one portal that Becca opened and then closed right away and was like, that's gonna be the real Judgment Day. If people go through there, that's what I saw. Now we're not really sure what's on the other side of that portal. We're not gonna know right now, but I'm pretty certain with the series ending, we're gonna know soon enough. But I do still think though that this is gonna be about time travel. I do think that they're gonna try to time travel, that's what this guy wants, Cadogan wants, and that's gonna end up messing things up, making things even worse than they already are. These are my thoughts on the topic. It is possible I'm wrong, I'm not saying that's certain, but I think that's a possibility. But there's the other thing about all of this. The one that gave the blood that Becca created, the name Nightblood, was Callback. That's pretty interesting. I mean, she's the inventor of the language. She is the one that gave the people the Nightblood. She is the one that gave Nightblood the name Nightblood. Mr. Cadogan, though, he did not really want that happening. He did not want to lose worshippers. He did not want people going out in the radiation and surviving like the Grounders did for so many years after that. And that was really the beginning of the separation, the beginning of him shepherding this group of blind followers and his daughter freeing that other group of Grounders, some of whom turned up to be blind followers over the years because that's the nature of human beings, but nonetheless, that was never really the objective. But yeah, Becca burnt at the stake. It was all about the flame that they got out of her, that they got for themselves in order to unlock the codes of that stone, that artifact. But instead, the daughter, Callback, managed to steal it, managed to take it with her as she left the bunkers with all those people whom she managed to get vaccinated with the Nightblood, the serum that works against the radiation. But okay though, besides your fight is over, there is another callback on this episode. You know, the kids, Cadogan's kids, fighting one another. That's interestingly enough representative of the Bellamy and Octavia sword fight. And even better, if I remember correctly, that happened in the bunker as well. So yeah, quite the callback there. The way that she gets everyone out of the bunker, everyone who's inoculated and ready to go, that explains how it all started, the Grounders and their culture, how they came to move from underground to above ground. The source was always the same, you know, both cultures were born as Second Dawn. The Grounders were originally Second Dawn, but they ended up changing their minds, deciding not to worship that one guy for too long, and decided to get out there, you know, continue their lives on Earth one way or another. But yeah, that in itself is one other reveal, because the Grounders have been there once before, you know, underground, that bunker, the very bunker that some of their descendants would spend time in, with Octavia being at the helm of things, another crazy person, another person who had issues, another person who prior to her redemption had herself moments in which her god complex got to her head. I do love though how the march of the two remaining major groups of human beings on Earth after the Alley Apocalypse, 2 years after the Alley Apocalypse, that happened to both destinations through the anomaly and above ground at the very same time. That represented the two opposites that father and daughter are. It represented the parting of father and daughter until they would end up meeting again. Callback is here in the mind of Clarke. But let us speak though of the final moment, you know, the friends coming in, Octavia, Dioza, and Echo. And I don't know, I just felt like they looked pretty brainwashed or reprogrammed in some sort of fashion. Guess we'll find out next week. But they did seem different, they did seem like, you know, things like revenge for Bellamy did not matter anymore to them. Like they were there, they are believers, they are disciples, and they're gonna fight the fight for these guys. That said though, this episode deserves a solid 9 to 9.5 out of 10. I'd actually give it a 9.5. Kudos for the great writing, kudos for the great connection of all those dots that we were missing, giving us an understanding of why a lot of things that we watched happen did happen in the first place, like Becca burning at the stake for example. The lovely part about all of it, and once again, is all about how they connected those dots, how they made it all intertwined and connected to one another. The last two major standing groups, you know, the Grounders on one hand, and on the other hand, the Second Dawn, we know how these groups are connected. We know that they are connected to start with, even though they both went completely separate ways. That said as well, let me know in the comments down below what you thought of this episode, what you think is gonna go down on next week's episode, and how do you rate this episode. But finally, you could let me know if you did like this video by dropping it one of those much appreciated likes, subscribing to this channel, and make sure while you are at it to enable notifications in order to get updates whenever I upload a new video, publish a new community post, or start a new live stream. But until the next time that you tune in for another one of my videos, the 100 or otherwise, thank you so much for tuning in to this video. Stay safe and have a great day.